So let's see, today's November 15th, it's Wednesday. We're still on airspace. This is part 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, remember? And last time we were looking at warning areas. They're off the coast. U.S. doesn't own the airspace, so you don't technically have to have permission to go in them, but it's a really, really good idea. And the symbol for warning areas is the same, that same blue with the blue hash line, so it looks just like a restricted area or prohibited area, except it says W dash something or other. And just like prohibited and warning areas, you can look at the edge of your charts to look up who you need to talk to find out if it's active or not. Alert areas. Alert areas are like restricted areas where things are happening, except that you don't have to ask anybody to fly through it. You can fly through a restricted area anytime, an alert area. You can fly through an alert area anytime you want without ever talking to anybody. Is it a good idea to do that? No. It's a good idea to look on the chart, see what the days and times of operation, and if it looks like it's on, then it would be good to call the controlling agency while you're in flight to let them know. Question? You have an extra? Call the controlling agency in flight and see if it's hot, or just tell them you're going through it. So let's see. You'll notice it says participating and non-participating aircraft shall maintain responsibility for see and avoid. I think it's kind of hard if you're going 100 miles an hour and a military jet's going 500 miles an hour. It's kind of hard to see and avoid at those. What if you're going head-on at 600-700 miles an hour head-on speed? It's not that it won't just hurt. It probably won't hurt because you'll probably die right away. How's that saying go? You won't know what hit you, but you won't be able to see something going that fast. Controlled firing areas aren't marked on charts, so there's no good way for you as a private pilot to know where the controlled areas are. And the only time you're going to hear about a controlled area is controlled firing area is if you get it via NOTAM, and we'll get to NOTAMs, N-O-T-A-Ms. HRSAs, I went and forgot our charts, so I'll be right back. So see if we. I don't think there's a TERSA on here. I know there's a TERSA down by Palm Springs. Pass one back, thanks. But Palm Springs isn't on this chart. You got to understand about TERSAs. You don't have to write this part down. I'm 99% sure you can't see Palm Springs. It's too low. It's on the Los Angeles section. But back in the old days, it was only a decade or two ago when the FAA went to following the ICAO standard airspace designations of class A, B, C, D, E, no F, but E. And before that, they called different kinds of airspace different things. There is a leftover from the days before the FAA turned into class A, B, C, D airspace. And one of these pieces of airspace is called a TERSA, a Terminal Radar Service Area. And a Terminal Radar Service Area, Luis, we're going to get to this before today is over. We're still on airspace. Terminal Radar Service Area. Need one too. Fine. Well, I like Luis more than I like you, didn't you? Did that before. In any case, you notice, look on the screen there, it says, provide separation from IFR and participating VFR traffic. So it's just some leftover airspaces. Here, this bud's for you. Oh, wait, look, I have a chart. It's just a leftover piece of airspace, and it's voluntary for VFR traffic to participate. But it's really, as far as what you would do, it's like Class C airspace. except that you don't have to have permission to fly through it. If you were going to land at an airport that was at the bottom of a TRSA, you'd call them up, and you'd talk to them first. They'd probably hand you off to the tower, or vice versa, or if you're flying through it. The only Tersa I've seen there in California is sitting on top of Palm Springs, an airport. I think it's the Palm Springs main airport. There's a lot of business jets and personal jets that fly in there. I guess there's a lot of rich people that live near Palm Springs. So they're just trying to do a better job separating VFR and IFR traffic. But I don't know of any Tersas that are on the San Francisco sectional, so I can't have you look it up. But let's see. All right. TFRs, on the other hand, this is a BFD. This is a big stinking deal. It's temporary flight restrictions. When I learned to fly back in the 1930s, we weren't even using radios. I flew airplanes that didn't even have electrical generators in them. They hadn't even invented electricity. They had to hand prop all the engines, the propellers, because there was no starter motors and no batteries. They hadn't even invented batteries when I learned how to fly. So TFRs were not a thing back then, but now they're this really, really big thing. And the TFR stands for Temporary Flight Restriction. You can pretty much guarantee I'm going to ask you this on the final exam. TFR stands for what 3 words? Temporary Flight Restriction. And it's just like a restricted area in that you can't fly through it unless you get permission to fly through it. And sometimes they will say no. Like they'll put TFRs, there's a TFR that's going to be sitting on top of Fresno, on top of the Cal State University Fresno Bulldog football stadium. I think they have a game this coming Saturday. There's going to be a TFR sitting on top of it. I think it's got a 3-mile radius to it. And I don't know if it usually goes up to 2, 3, 4, 5,000 feet. And you can't fly through it without getting permission in advance. There was a TFR on top of Disneyland, but it finally became permanent. I don't know if they actually turned it into some other kind of an airspace. I saw something about it, and at the moment I can't remember it. But they put a TFR on top of Disneyland and said indefinitely. Like a 1-mile radius around Disneyland. You just couldn't fly over it unless you were above 10,000 feet. Of course, I figured, okay, so if you're above 10,000 feet, if you drop something out of your airplane, you probably won't hit it. Is that why it was 10,000 feet? I don't know. In any case, it's common to put TFRs on top of large gatherings of, like they put a TFR on top of the Super Bowl. They put TFRs on top of playoff games, especially if the sport is outdoors. They do it. Wherever the president goes, they put a TFR on top of that. Another example of TFR is if they're doing if there's a forest fire and they're flying airplanes and helicopters in to drop fire retardant, they will put a TFR, a temporary flight restriction, on top of it so that people don't fly and get in their way. In fact, there's been a big problem of setting up TFRs, and then people who fly small unmanned aircraft systems fly into that TFR. I can't remember, it was 6 months or a year ago. It was somewhere in California, I think. They were doing firefighting and a TFR was set up, and somebody decided they wanted to take video with their drone, and they flew into that TFR. And so somebody noticed it, so they had to stop all the flying, because if that drone's out and you hit it with a helicopter, it could not just damage the helicopter, it might kill somebody, because the helicopter, you bust off a rotor blade, it's really not fun. So they had to stop the firefighting. So they found him, and they went, I'm sure they're going to do something very unpleasant to him. Brian. You can fly drones over an airport, but you have to get permission from the airport, from the tower. You have to call the tower on a landline and say, hey, I want to fly my drone in this location at this time and this high. You weren't here yesterday. Oh, yeah. See, we covered that yesterday. See what happened. It's at school. You can ask. I can't remember if the radius is within 3 miles or 5 miles of a controlled tower airport. Controlled airport. You have to call the tower and ask them permission in advance. I'd have to look that up. I studied that once. but I got my remote pilot certificate like a year and a half ago, and I'm not out there flying them around enough to, the only time I do it is supervising students out on the football field at Ridley College, so I don't worry about flying near airports too much. But we could look that up, just not right at this minute. So if there's a TFR, it doesn't just apply to airplanes and helicopters, it applies to small unmanned aircraft systems. Even if you don't have a remote pilot certificate and all it is a remote controlled airplane, the FAA says that is a small unmanned aircraft system, an SUAS. Even if you don't have a remote pilot certificate and you're just doing it for recreational purposes, you can't fly through a TFR. Now most of the time TFRs for little tiny airplanes, if you ask, they're going to say no, that you can't fly through it. But I did look at the one. Let's see if I can call up the one that's going to be over Fredericksburg. Well, Fredericksburg is a slightly different pronunciation than Freno. Oh, I know what I can do. Yeah, what is it, Jonathan? Who's? That's a good question. What's the line of communications from who to get the TFR set up? That's a really good question. See if I can remember my login here. Let's see. If I have a flight plan and I tell them I want to fly on Saturday, and we'll say it's at 7:30. Let's say I want to fly into Fresno. And the 18th, that's Saturday, right? Shucks. Maybe. I haven't used this one in particular but this iPad, it'll show TFRs if there's one scheduled. I don't know how to get it to show it. Normally what I do to make sure I don't fly through TFRs is I call the flight service station, and when I get the weather for my route, and I ask for things like NOTAMs, notice to airmen, I'm going to cover that today. It has things like NOTAMs or things like the runway is closed, or the PAPI or the VASI is broken, or the rotating beacon doesn't work, or there's construction on the airport and a taxiway is closed. Those are all NOTAMs. So when you say I'm going to fly from this airport to that airport, and you're going to fly at this altitude and this route, then they pull all the stuff off of the computer and they just tell you over the phone, and you just take notes. And what I always do is I make sure I get the NOTAMs for the airports, and then I always ask them, are there any TFRs that are in place near my route of flight for when I'm going to fly. And that way, if they don't notice it and they don't tell me about it, they record all those phone conversations. I'm not making this up. They record all those phone conversations. So if I now go take off when I say I'm going to and fly the route I say I'm going to, and I fly through a TFR, come get me after I land, then I'm not busted. Yay. Because they made a mistake by not telling me. So calling the flight service station and getting a briefing is the legal equivalent of I got all that information I was supposed to get. Now there are other ways you can go online, and I haven't done it yet. You can go online and look for TFRs with the FAA, and somehow, some way, because I did it I was goofing around on my iPad with this program, and a TFR showed up over the stadium in Fresno, and it's about a 3-mile diameter and actually stuck into close to Fresno Airport. So I'm sure they're going to let people take off and land out of the airport, but you're going to have to be on air traffic control to be able to do that. Because I don't think they're going to shut down Fresno Airport just because there's a football game. It's not like it's the Super Bowl. If it was the Super Bowl, they might shut down the airport, but probably not. Unfortunately, I don't seem to be able to either, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe there's not a football game on the 18th. Is there like a home game? Here's the schedule. Here we go. November 18th. Oh, 11 a.m. Pacific time. I'd take a couple of seconds to know to show it. Yeah, what's your question, Jonathan? Well, it says TFR. I'm asking for TFRs right there. So the 18th. It's 11:35 a.m. Well, maybe I just don't know how to do it, or maybe there's not really a TFR there. Or maybe it's not working out. Which is another good reason for me to call the flight service station. Because if I call them and they say there's no TFRs, sweet. All right, so TFRs can be small. They might only be 1 or 2 miles in radius. They might be 5 or 10 miles in radius. If there's a big forest fire, it's probably going to be bigger. I've seen forest fires in Arizona where they had 2 or 3 or 4 of them, because the fire was in different places and they were attacking, and they sometimes changed every day. So there we go. On the bottom, you can get this data via the internet. You can get it on an iPad app, or the way I usually do it is I call the flight service station. That's what FSS stands for. Oh, wait, look, there's NOTAMs. NOTAMs is an abbreviation for 3 words. There's a really good test question. NOTAMs is an abbreviation for 3 words. Notice to airmen. And so NOTAMs are things that happen and it's too late to put it on a chart. For instance, sectional VFR charts are good for, I think they're good for 180 days. I think they last for 6 months. But there's things that get put up, the things that get built that didn't get into the last printing. Or more importantly, things like I said, like the runway is closed or a light is burned out, or maybe the tower, maybe they decided the tower in Fresno, instead of being open 24 hours, it's going to close at midnight until 4 a.m. So things that would be airmen, pilots need to know about. So there's NOTAM L, those are minor things that if you didn't know, it probably wouldn't be that big of a deal. But if I was flying to an airport and there was migratory birds, ask Mr. Sullenberger if it's nice to know if there's a lot of birds, although I don't think they would do anything differently. NOTAM D is things that affect the airport, like runways and taxiways, stuff like that. And then FDC NOTAMs are big things like temporary flight restrictions. So here's what's great, being a pilot and calling flight service station. You call them up, you say your VFR, you give your N number of your airplane, you give them the proposed takeoff time, you tell them how long it's going to take, you give them your route of flight, the airport you're going to take off from, the airport you're going to land at, and then if they don't say the words, there are no NOTAMs, then you just ask them, you say, are there any NOTAMs for the airports or my route of flight? And they're going to come back. Now, if you're flying into Fresno, the likelihood is there's probably some NOTAM at the Fresno airport going on at any given time. Construction, a quarter mile east of runway 29 or right. Beware of cranes extending 50 feet up, or something like that. Okay, great. There's cranes a quarter mile away. If I'm that far away from the runway when I'm 50 feet off the ground, I deserve to crash into the crane. So I'm not really that worried about it. If I was going to land there at night and they said the runway lights were inoperative, then I would want to know that. Of course, there's 2 runways, and they said if one runway the lights are out, what do I care? I'm in a little airplane, and both the runways are long. So it's not that a NOTAM will stop you from going. You just need to look at it and say, is this going to impact my flight, and am I going to keep going? You know, there's no FAR that says you have to have runway lights to land. When I learned how to fly back in the 1930s at Ridley Airport, there were no runway lights. The runway was about 2,000 feet long. The asphalt was a little bit more than a wingspan, about 35, 40 feet wide, and there were no lights on the runway of any kind whatsoever. No runway lights, no taxi lights, no rotating beacon, no nothing. So when we went to get a private pilot certificate, you need to get 3 hours at night. So my instructor took a car battery, put it in the back of the airplane, and we did all the thing. Fly the airplane, taxied out, and got to the runway, and he got out of the airplane and took this battery and stuck it on the end of the runway with this red light. It's about 6 inches in diameter, you know, which is, when you're like 1,000 feet above it, it looks really small. In any case, we took off and we went and flew at other airports that had lights, and we practiced taking off and landing at other airports. And then when we came back, he took the controls and flew the pattern, landed it, knowing where seeing that little tiny red light. It's actually pretty easy to find Ridley Airport. If you look at the simulator that we flew a week or 2 or 3 ago, the lights were really, really bright inside of a patch of blackness. Well, think about all those lights being gone and then trying to figure out where the runway is. The good news is there's a really small winery about 1/2 to 3/4 of a mile away from the runway. And if you know where it is and you know it's there, you can say, oh, there's those lights, and therefore the airport must be there. And that's how he found where that little red light was. But we landed, I'm not saying, I look back at it now and I go, I don't know how safe that was. But of course I was a stupid 16-and-a-half-year-old kid. What did I know? Oh yeah, my flight instructor says we can do it. Of course he told me I don't get to do that. I don't get to take off and land at the airport at night without lights. So. No, there was nothing there. There was literally some asphalt and grass and skunks. Whenever I drive along, I smell a skunk. It takes me back to taking flying lessons, because back then the airport wasn't fenced off, and it seems like there was about. When I went out to the airport, I'd smell skunk. So I think I don't think it was infested, but I think there was a skunk now and then. And every now and then, one of them got hit by a car, I guess. I never heard of a skunk getting hit by the airplane at that airport. So I actually associate skunk smell with flying lessons. But no, there was no rotating beacon, no VASI, no PAPI, no runway lights, no taxi lights. There might have been a light over where the airport office is. So there might have been a light or 2. But it was just some random white light down there. So I'm not trying to convince you that it's okay or safe to land at airports at night. I'm just saying technically there's no law against it. So if you read the NOTAMs and it said the lights were inoperative, now you get to make a decision. Question, Jaron? No, you do not have to have an instrument rating to fly at night in the United States. There are some foreign countries, Europe in particular, where flying at night, I think you have to have an instrument rating. But I couldn't swear to that. But absolutely not. The only time you have to have an instrument rating is when you are flying by sole reference to the cockpit instruments. So here's a good thought. Let's say, I'm glad you asked that. So let's talk about your VFR pilot. You don't have an instrument rating. It's VFR, but when would you have to be flying solely by reference to instruments? Let's say that it's barely 3 miles visibility. It's smoggy and hazy. And you take off at night, for instance, and you're in the haze, and it's 3 miles visibility, but you climb up and the haze is pretty thick, and you slowly can't see the lights on the ground, and it's a moonless night, and the haze is thick enough above you that you can't see the stars very well. You could be flying around legally VFR. The only way you can tell whether the nose of the airplane is up or down is by. So technically, there is a moment where you could say, aha, I am flying solely by reference to instruments, and I can't do that because I don't have an instrument rating. So you have to pay attention to that and don't take off and go fly in it. or if you take off and then realize, holy crap, I'm flying by reference to instruments, you really need to turn around and land. Or if there's an airport straight ahead of you, maybe you ought to, instead of trying to turn around. But there's been many, many deaths by pilots who have been who didn't have instrument, or most of the time they didn't have an instrument rating, and they flew into lousy weather, and sometimes it was legal, and then they got spatial disorientation, and they weren't used to practicing flying just staring at the instruments. And the problem is your inner ear and your sense of which way you're getting pulled gets all messed up when you're flying an airplane. Like if you shove in the rudder or something, you can make your inner ear wiggle around, and so your body thinks you're turning and you're not. So you try to get out of the turn, and it actually makes you turn in the other direction. And there's a whole I could talk for an hour on that. How's that? It's pretend. Confident on doing that? Could I fly level for 5 minutes? Yeah. Could I turn around? Do that. Question, Jonathan? Yeah, it's called a limiting device. When you're taking instrument flying lessons, when I did it, it was a hood. It actually came over your head, and it stuck out about 6 or 8 inches in front of you, and it was about 6 inches around. So all you can see is your lap and the control wheel and the instruments that you're looking at. If you tilted your head up to look outside, your instructor hit you in the back of the head. I'm just kidding. They'd never hit you in the back of the head. But they can tell if you're looking out the window. So the point is that now they have little glass clips. I have a thing that'll clip onto my glasses, and there's just little tiny cutouts in the bottom and the center, so I can't see out the top 3/4 of my glasses. So I actually have to tilt my head up and hold my head straight ahead, just so I can look down and see the instruments. So that's what's called a view device. Back in the day, all it was a hood, so you actually put on that hood, and then you flew around that way, and that counted as instrument flying. All right, so the best way to get NOTAMs is also the best way to find out where the TFRs are, and that's called the Flight Service Station, and the phone number is 1-800-WEATHER BRIEF. WX is an abbreviation for weather, so that's in my phone. So there's a lot of great things you can do with the Flight Service Station. Like I said, you call them up, you tell them when you're taking off, how long your route is, what airport you're taking off from, what airport you're going to land at. You'll give them what altitude you're going to be at. You tell them if you're VFR or IFR, and you ask them for a standard briefing. They're going to give you an outlook and say, not an outlook. They're going to give you a view of what the weather will be like. They'll tell you the expected visibility and how many clouds are going to be at the airport you're going to take off at and the airport you're going to land at, and along the way. They'll tell you the height of the clouds. They'll give you how fast the wind is blowing at the altitude, so you can use that for your flight planning. And if they say it, you ask, are there any NOTAMs for this flight? And if they don't say, you're going to ask, are there any TFRs I need to be aware of for this flight? It's awesome, because that's what somebody does all day. They sit in front of a computer and eat. What was our last kind of sandwich? Oh wait! Don't tell me. No, don't tell me. It was Italian meat, herb, and cheese, right? Okay, one person remembered it was Italian because it's got salami in it, right? Yeah. That's good for you. That pork fat goes straight to your arteries and sits there forever. Yeah, pork fat in your arteries. I'm sure that's what the Flight Service Station briefers do. They eat a lot of Italian meat, herb, and cheese sandwiches. Talking on the phone. Okay, so that's the end of airspace. Hey. No quizzes are on Mondays. It's not like the old days. So now we're going to start pilotage and dead reckoning. Jonathan, question? Because we're skipping chapter 5, 6, 7, and 8. No, I'm looking at what's the most interesting things left to do, because we're not going to get through all the chapters. Like, I don't think we're going to even get to meteorology. But I want to do cross-country flight planning because I think it's fun. So there. So we're going to start what we're going to start doing with Dead Reckoning and Pilotage is we're going to start learning all the things you need to know so you can pull out a sectional and say, I want to go from Selma to, let's see, I want to go see Space Shuttle Endeavour at the Los Angeles Center. Yeah. It's on poles. If you, it's about 9 feet up there, Brian. Yeah, it's pretty sweet, man. It's pretty cool, man. You actually get to see a real-life space shuttle. Oh, it's a mock-up. Yeah, what you need to do is go to, and I'll be reminding you, there is a real SR-71 on display at the Castle Air Museum up in Atwater, just on the other side of Merced. In May, they had what was called Open Cockpit Day. Now, I'm not saying they let you crawl into it, but they open up the cockpits, and so you can actually look inside of them. And I don't know how many airplanes they open the cockpits to, but I'll be reminding you of that. I don't think it's on a Saturday, or it's on a Sunday, actually. I don't think I can do a Valley ROP field trip, but I'm going to be reminding you. I'm going to go this May, or whenever it is, to Open Cockpit Day, because I think it's fun to look in the cockpits and go, yeah, take pictures and stuff. So they have a lot. That used to be a Strategic Air Command base, a bomber base, and SR-71s were in the Strategic Air Command, and B-52s, 6s. So they have 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 different military bombers. They got B-29, they got B-7, back to World War II stuff. So if you're into that sort of thing. All right. You want to navigate. To navigate, you want to get from one place to another. There's really 3 things you need to be doing. The one we're going to talk about first, or correction, 4 things you need to be doing. And one is flight planning. And the way I'm describing flight planning is pretty much everything to you that you do on the ground before you get to the airplane. Everything you need to do on the ground before you actually go out to the airplane. So flight planning. So these are the things that you're going to have to pay attention to. So it is against federal law for you to go flying without a chart that is a current and valid chart. It can't be expired. So if you look at your chart, yeah, some of these are like from 2011. This one here, hang on a second, you'll notice that it says it's effective on a day and then it's good until another day. That means technically, after that day is over, which is the 3rd of March of 2016 on this chart, you can't use this anymore. So you got to go spend another $15 or whatever it is to get another one. Question, Jonathan? Yes, it can be digital. That's one of the things I like about ForeFlight, the iPad app that's on my iPad. You can pay $100 a year, and you have all the valid and current charts for the entire 50 states for $100. About $15 a piece, I think. I haven't bought one for almost a decade because it's been $100. You can have, which is what we have, and you could have the, and so that's 6 months. That's $60 a year. But there's so many other nifty things. One of these days, I'll bring my iPad in and turn on the document camera, and we'll play ForeFlight. After we learn flight in the hard way, then I'll show you how to do it the easy way. You need to know how to do it the hard way. Somebody always asks me, well, Sir Johnson, how come we have to do it the old school way? And it's because you have to be able to look at what your computer is giving you in the way of data and look at it and at least make an estimate. Does that look about right? Anybody ever heard of that TLAR, T-L-A-R? That looks about right. And so if you've not done it, man, yeah, TLAR, I'm telling you, this is an aviation term. I'm not making it up like I usually do. T-L-A-R is TLAR. That looks about right. So if your computer flight plan, and 3 hours to get to Bakersfield, you're going to go, let's see, Bakersfield's 110 nautical miles away. My airplane goes 90 knots. It ought to take like an hour and 10, hour and 20 minutes. How come it tells me it's 3 hours? So that's why you need to be good at planning, is so you get used to looking at it and going, okay, if I'm going to blowing me from the left, that means I need to turn into the wind a little bit. So it's just you need to be able to do it slowly and the hard way, I guess is the way it is. Manually, there we go. That's the word, manually. So when the computer does it, you can look at it, because that's what's going to end up happening. Literally, there is no airline pilot on the planet that pulls out a chart and measures it and writes down how far it is and looks at the wind and calculates how far to turn left into the wind or anything like that. A computer does it. And in fact, at airlines, there's a person called a flight dispatcher. Pilot shows up, and they turn on a computer. They log into a computer and call up the flight, and they probably print out 5 or 10 pages of stuff. And they look at it and they, okay, I'm going to fly from Los Angeles to New York. That's 2,500 miles. I go 500 nautical miles an hour. That's 5 hours. The airplane burns 20,000 pounds an hour. I should have 100,000 pounds of fuel plus my reserves. Now I look at it and it shows 150,000 pounds. I go, wow, that's a lot. That's 50% more. My reserve isn't. I don't need 50,000 extra pounds. So then they go back in and look at it. So you got to be able to look at a computer-generated flight plan and see if it looks about right. So you got to have a current chart. If you want to fly on a cross-country flight, you have to decide, where am I taking off from and where am I going to land? Now I know technically here I put the word airport, but there is no FAA regulation that says you have to land at an airport. Let me say that again. There's no FAA regulation that says you have to land at an airport. If you own a piece of land and you think it's flat enough and smooth enough, you can land on it. If you know somebody that has a piece of land and you as the pilot in command think that it's flat enough and smooth enough to land on it, you won't get your tire stuck in a gopher hole, you can land on it. Now, is it legal to land an airplane on a state, county, or city road? No, not unless the engine quit, because your car, your motor vehicle, your airplane, isn't a car. It's not registered in the state of California, right? So you can't operate it. It's not farm equipment either, just so you know. It's not like it's a tractor. So you can't state, federal, or county or city roads because it's not a car. Obviously, if the engine quits, you're landing your airplane on a road if it saved people's lives. So really, the only restriction for where you can land, take off and land, is it as far as the FAA is concerned. Because if you landed your airplane on a state road, FAA wouldn't write you a ticket. I don't know. They might start looking at you as this careless and reckless operation. I don't know. Question? Yeah. Either you're going to, somebody's going to figure out, make sure the airplane's still airworthy, and you talk to the local police, law enforcement authorities, and if they're real nice, you can convince them to block off the road and you take off. And if you can't do that, then you bring airplane mechanics out in a truck and you disassemble it, take the wings off, maybe take the horizontal stabilizer off, and put it in a truck, which is very expensive. To take it apart and put, like a Cessna 152 out there, that two-seater, if you landed on a road and you didn't hurt it, but now you can't take it off for some reason, you have to disassemble it, it's probably going to cost you $3,000 to $5,000 to take it apart, stick it in the truck, back of the truck, so it doesn't get damaged, and then take it somewhere at an airport and then reassemble it. Yeah, it's probably going to be at least $5,000, maybe $4,000. I was looking into it a long time ago. I almost moved to Hawaii, and I was thinking about, do I fly the airplane to Hawaii, or do I take it apart and put it in a can? The shipping to Hawaii was going to be just under $4,000. I hadn't called my insurance company up and how much extra insurance they wanted. Because if the engine quit, I'm going to ditch it in the Pacific Ocean, and that would be a total loss. But you can have a little airplane like that. You take it out, except the pilot seat, and you put in extra fuel tanks inside of the airplane, and you run the line to the fuel tanks. In any case, you can fly Cessna 172 from Monterey, California to Hilo, Hawaii. It's about 24 hours. Well, it's 2,400 nautical miles. The airplane goes about 100 nautical miles an hour. You sit there and wait till there's not much in the way of headwinds, and then you go. And Monterey has a nice, like a 6,000 or 7,000 foot long runway, and there's no obstacles off the end. You take off towards the ocean. And so, because you won't climb, because you can get permission from the FAA for this one flight to load the airplane up 20 or 30% heavier than is normally legal. So you overload it with gasoline. And you take a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and a ham sandwich, and you, Nah, I'm old school, man. It's just like little Starbucks espresso cans. You bring gallon buckets, gallon things of water. No, not out the window. That doesn't work though. Air comes back in. You will not be. You take like quart bottles of water, and then you can, after they're empty, then you can use them for other purposes. I know a guy that has flown in little airplanes across from California to Hawaii like 6 or 7, 8 times. It's not that bad. I mean, you just got to climb up to 5,000, 6,000 feet, and you take a 5-minute cat nap, and then you wake up. So what you do is you set your watch to go off in 5 or 10 minutes. So if you fall asleep, you won't fall asleep and then slowly over a half an hour hit the water. That's not good. Question? Yeah, you can go to the restroom. But why don't you just pee in Josh's water bottle over there? I'm just kidding. No one wants to watch that. Okay, so you got to have a current chart. You got to decide where you're going to take off, where you're going to land. You got to start thinking about the terrain. Now, the terrain between here, let's say we wanted to fly from here to Sacramento. There's not a whole lot of terrain. It's the flat central San Joaquin Valley. The terrain's anywhere from 200 to 400 feet above the ground. It's probably pretty much all between 300 and 400 feet above the ground. The only real thing you got to worry about there is the next one is obstacles in the way of towers. But what if you wanted to fly to Las Vegas? Let's look at our charts. Pull out your chart, and I want you to find Reedley Airport and then go south of it about 15 miles and find Visalia Airport. I want you to find Visalia Airport. So we're going to pretend that we're going to go on a flight to Vegas. We're going to go from Reedley to Vegas. So you can't see Vegas. How far does your chart go over? Do you all have restricted area 2505 on it? This one right here? Do you have restricted area 2505 on it? Okay. So how about this wash right here, this dry lake? Do you have this dry lake here? No? Yeah? I have a yes and I have a no. All right. No. Well, the hardest part about getting to Las Vegas from here, you got really two choices. You can either take off and go straight just for fun. Let's see, add that to the route. And we'll get rid of FAT. We'll get rid of FAT. So there, if we were going to go straight, which we could, look what we're going to do over the mountains over here. We're going to have to either fly directly over a very high spot over the mountains, or we're going to have to fly farther south and go where the mountains are lower. So just for fun, what's this airport right here? It's pretty much due east of, not quite Reedley. What's this name of this airport right here? What is it called? Yeah, the one on my chart, it says Lone Pine. Can you find that airport that says Lone Pine? No? So here's Reedley. I got Reedley on the left. And if we go pretty much straight over to the other side of the Sierra Nevada, I see Lone Pine Airport. MOA stands for Military Operations Area. Why was that not on my list of special use airspace? Yeah, I'm going to get back. We're going to fix our airspace because I don't know how I didn't put MOAs on it. But what's rather interesting, I've been to the city of Lone Pine. I've actually seen an airplane take off and land out of Lone Pine. But you notice just to the left of Lone Pine, there's a black dot, and right next to it, it says 14,491 feet. That's the highest point in the lower 48 states of the United States. It's called Mount Whitney. It's named after some guy named Whitney. I'm pretty sure it's a guy. In any case, that's the MSL altitude of that piece of terrain. So if we wanted to fly straight line, you notice I've got that blue line on there. If we wanted to fly straight between Reedley and Las Vegas International, we're going to be close to a mountain that's 14,491 feet. And generally, feet above the highest obstacle that's directly below you. We don't have to stay 2,000 feet above this thing because we're not going to fly over it, but we need to look below us and then add 2,000 feet. What was your question? Yeah, Cessna Citation jet, it'll go to 50, 60,000, it'll go to 50,000 feet. You mean a Cessna little one, like a two-seater? No, a Cessna 152, like the dead of winter, it won't get, it'd be hard-pressed to get to 10,000 feet. Now, 72, I have this cool 1969 172, it'll get to 12,500 feet. I've done it on more than one occasion, but it takes a while. Because the higher you go, the less air there is, burn as much gas. If I can't burn as much gas, well, I start climbing, at my rate climb speed, and then I put in the right pedal, and it takes an hour to get to 12,500 feet, maybe 40 minutes. But if it means I don't have to fly south, it might be worth it. So I'm going to dig in there, and I notice that right by my little blue line here, I'm zooming in, there's a 14,026-foot peak right there. You ought to be able to see that black dot. Yeah, I know you don't have a blue line on it, but can you find that mountain peak that's 14,026 feet? Okay, so if I wanted to fly straight line, and I wanted to be reasonably safe in a light airplane, you want to climb and be 2,000 feet higher than the mountain if you're going to fly over mountains, at least 2,000 feet. So if I use that, that means I'd have to fly at least 16,000 feet. Well, there's a problem here with flying at 16,000 feet in a little tiny airplane. And one of them is, will my airplane get there? And my 172, it won't get to 16,000 feet. The other problem is that I'll probably get hypoxia at 16,000 feet. Hypoxia means lack of oxygen. And in fact, it would be illegal, not just unsafe, but it would be illegal. The FAA regulation for using oxygen is going to be written down by you all right now. Is that for any required crew member, and in a little tiny airplane, you're the pilot, so you're the only required crew member. So required crew members have to wear oxygen if you go above 12,500 feet for more than 30 minutes. Let me say that again. You gotta wear oxygen. You gotta use oxygen if you go above 12,500 feet for more than 30 minutes. So you can go to 12,800 and you can stay there for 30 minutes. As long as just before 30 minutes you descend back down to 12,500. So effectively, you can fly at 12,500 feet all day long and never use 12,500 feet. You have to start using oxygen no more than 30 minutes after you exceeded 12,500. Yeah. Where do you buy oxygen? Big airports like Fresno. There's a couple of FBOs there. You could get your tanks on your airplane filled with oxygen there. But you got to use aviator oxygen, not medical oxygen, because medical oxygen might have a little moisture in it. But airplane oxygen needs to have zero moisture in it because your tank, your oxygen tank, might go below freezing, and you don't want the water in it to freeze and then no oxygen can come out. So that's the big difference between aviator's oxygen and medical oxygen. Is aviator oxygen has absolutely no water in it. Okay, so let's say you climb up. I'm not done yet with this rule here because it's not that tricky. I mean, it's not that simple. Anytime you go above 14,000 feet, you got to wear oxygen all the time. So if you're between 12,500, above 12,500, but you haven't exceeded 14,000, you can be there for 30 minutes. But anytime 14,000 feet, you, the pilot, or all the required crew, which on your airplane is just going to be the pilot, you have to use oxygen the entire time as soon as you go above 14,000 feet. And then there's one last one. At 15,000 feet or higher, you have to provide oxygen to the passengers. And I'm using the word provide. There's no law that says that they have to use it. The law for the pilot or the required crew members, like the co-pilot or the flight engineer or the flight attendants, they're required crew members. They have to use the oxygen. So if I'm a little private pilot, I can climb up to 12,500 feet, and legally I can stay there all day long, and I never have to use any oxygen. But as soon as I climb up to 12,501 feet, I now got to keep track of my time, because within 30 minutes I either have to descend back down to 12,500 or I need to start using oxygen no later than 30 minutes later. But then if I continue climbing, whenever I hit 14,000 feet, I got to start using oxygen right smack at that point. What's that? Well, you brought up a good point. What about airliners? I'm talking about the pressure inside of the cabin. So if I'm in a pressurized airplane, like an airliner or a biz jet, they usually keep the inside of the cabin at 8,000 feet. So nobody has to use oxygen masks unless it depressurizes, and then it's a different story. So really, when I say that, it's not really the altitude of the airplane, it's the altitude inside the cabin. But in the airplanes we're going to fly, they're not pressurized. So the inside pressure is the same as what your altimeter says. So here's a factor then, as far as terrain is concerned. If I want to fly to Vegas, and I want to climb 2,000 feet higher than the terrain, I have to have oxygen. And what if I don't have oxygen system? I want to go spend $500 or $800 on an inexpensive oxygen system just so I can make one flight to detour a little bit? Probably not. You'd probably rather spend an extra half an hour in the airplane and burn an extra $50 in gas than spend $500 on an oxygen system. So what I would end up doing, question? You provide oxygen to passengers at above 15,000 feet cabin pressure. So what I would do if I was going to go on this flight, oh wait, there's another piece of data here. In the United States, if you are below 3,000 feet AGL, you can fly from airport to airport wherever you want to go, and it doesn't matter what altitude you're at. So here, the ground level at the airport is 380 feet. So as long as I'm below 3,380 indicated, or MSL on my altimeter, I can fly from there to Hanford. As long as I'm usually going to climb up to 1,000, even though I probably where it could be 500 feet above the highest obstacle, or 500 feet away from vessel, vehicle, structures, or persons. But I'm probably going to climb up to at least 1,000 feet. So if the engine quits, I got a couple of minutes. That increases the distance I could glide for an airport, so not to a dirt road. So I'm probably going to climb up to 1,000 feet. But if I wanted to fly to Hanford at 1,100 feet, 1,200 feet, or 1,300, or at 3,002 feet, or at 2,700 feet, I could at any altitude I want. 1,000 feet AGL. More than 3,000. across countries, and we don't want everybody flying at the same altitude and hitting each other. So the FAA says, oh, we're in the middle of Class E airspace, and we don't have to talk to anybody. You can fly there all you want, but if you're going to fly above 3,000 feet above the ground, you have to fly at climbing or descending. So when you level off, if you're going towards the west, you have to fly even altitudes plus 500. If I'm flying towards the east, I have to fly odd altitudes plus 500. So let's say I'm going to fly from here to Santa Cruz. It's on the coast. It's mostly west. There's some mountains in the way. I could take off and I could level off, and as long as I'm below 3,000 feet AGL, I could stay that the whole time. And I could climb a little bit when the mountains got there. As long as I'm within 3,000 feet AGL, I can stay at any altitude I want. But let's say I just want to get altitude and stay at the same altitude to go to Santa Cruz, or the winds up there are blowing in my direction and it makes me go faster. So as soon as I get above 3,000 feet AGL, aha, now I got to fly even altitudes plus 500. So I can't fly at 3,500 because that's odd plus 500. So I'd have to go all up to the next even altitude plus 500. I'd have to go to 4,500. Now I can be more than 3,000 feet above the ground, and I'm going west, so I'm flying an even altitude plus 500. So now I'm flying at 4,500. People coming from Santa Cruz going to Reedley, they're going to be at 3,500 feet or 5,500 feet. And so in theory, we'll have 1,000 feet of separation between me and rhyme to these. There is a lot of reasons to these rhymes. The IFR traffic is flying at the even thousands. They're flying at 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. That's why the VFR people are flying plus 500s. So if I took off from Reedley and I wanted to go a straight line to Vegas, and I was in a light airplane, I'm going to climb, and I was going to climb up. Let's see, the mountain was 14,000 feet. Well, I don't have to fly 2,000 feet above the mountains. That's not a law. There's not a lot of, that's a sparsely populated, non-congested area, 500 feet away, 500 feet above obstacles, vessels, vehicle structures, or persons. I can fly as low to the mountains as I want. In fact, they're pretty close out there because there's not much there. But but let's say it's at 14,000. I want to be at least 2,000 feet. That's 16,000, but I'm going east. Can I go 16,500 if I'm going east? No, so I'm either going to go down to 15,500, which is only 1,500 feet above that mountain, or instead of 15,500, I'm going to have to go to 17,500. And one of those, I got to have oxygen. And I like to fly 2,000 feet above mountains. So probably what I'm going to do is not fly a straight line. I'm going to keep going either north or south and find a place where the mountains are lower and fly that way. Because if I'm going to climb up and get there, it's a lot easier to just say, okay, what altitude is there where the wind's good? Okay, I'm just going to climb to 12,500. Or correction, if I'm going to Vegas, it's east. I'm going to climb to 11,500 or 13,500. So it's a question. If I climb to 13,500, how long can I fly there before I have to put on oxygen? 30 minutes after I exceeded 12,500. So as soon as I go past 12,500, that's when my 30 minutes has to start. So in my little tiny airplane, am I going to pick 13,500 feet? No. So I'm going to go to Vegas at 11,500. So what I want to try to do is find the highest peak that's 9,500 or less, and now I'm 2,000 feet above the highest obstacle. So what I would do there is I would look at these mountains, and I would start going, Las Vegas is south, so I'm probably going to start looking south, and I'm going to start looking for a mountain pass that's 9,500 feet. Well, let's see, here's a 10,000-foot mountain, here's an 11,000-foot mountain, here's 11, here's 12. It's hard to tell at the moment what this is right there, but, Yeah, but that's probably not it. You're right. I'm probably going to go lower. Well, look, here's 9,800. Here's 9,600. Wow, if I flew down here right above the top of Isabella Moa, that would work out pretty well. Although as soon as I get over the mountains, there's a Owens Moa, but in here, this is restricted 2505. So that, and that's okay, but if I flew down here, I'd have to turn and come north and then keep going. But that's okay. I know how to turn the airplane. I'm really good at airplane turning. It's in like that top 3,000 things I can do really, really well. If no, oh, they'll see you on radar. Oh, they'll see you. I promise they will see you. I promise they will see you. And when they see you, they will go, is that just some stupid idiot? And we need to teach him a lesson, so let's scramble some F-16s and go scare them and make them pee their pants. Or are they doing something that's really bad, and let's go scare them and make them pee their pants and make them land at an airport and arrest and question them and interrogate them and detain them. And not let them have Italian meat, herb, and cheese sandwiches. So I've flown this route before, and that's what I've done is, if I go straight across, you'll notice, what if I put you notice Visalia, if we flew south to Visalia and then kept going, it's about in the right spot, but not quite, because we really want to get down here. So what I would do is, and I'm not going to, in this flight planning, I can say details, and I can add a route. Whoops. And I can drag this up. That's why I like ForeFlight. There. And I can go, you know what? Look, that still puts me in the middle of that restricted area. So I'm going to put a spot right there. And add to the route. Let's see if it'll put it in the right place. No, it doesn't. Okay, we'll put it right there. Yeah. I could put another dot right there. This is almost the same as what I would be doing on my iPad. Oh, no. Well, I have an iPad. I'm glad you asked. I have an iPad that was designed to be the thing about iPads, there's good things and bad things about iPads. If you get an iPad that doesn't have capability for cell phone, does not have a built-in GPS, but for $100 you can buy a GPS that's battery powered, it will charge off of a cigarette lighter, you stick the instrument panel of your airplane, and via Bluetooth it'll run GPS data into your iPad. So if you happen to have one that doesn't have capability, I didn't say you're using cell phones. If you don't have one, you can buy this external one. If you buy one that has cellular capability, you don't have to buy the cell phone. That's the iPad I have. I bought it from the last place I worked because it was about 4 years old when I left, and I gave them $100 and they let me have it. It was a Wi-Fi correction. It was cellular capable, but we never turned it on. But it has a built-in GPS. You can fly all day long without GPS. And it works great because I mount it on the control wheel of my airplane, and it can receive GPS signals out through the windshield. And if it's getting out of 26, it rocks really nice. And I also have a different program on my phone. And literally, it sets a purple airplane. I don't think it's purple. Maybe it's a different color airplane. When you're flying, this line turns purple and the airplane is blue. And the airplane just flies along this line. And you turn left or turn right to stay on top of the line. It's ridiculously easy. If you get lost and you're using a GPS, then you're just really, really stupid. Just really, really, really stupid. But what I like it, so sorry, I'm showing you one of the easy ways. So if I was planning this flight, then I would be using a pencil and I would be putting dots. I'd put a dot around here, and I'd put a dot around here. You know, or I think there's some way to move that. Yeah, there we go. See, I can move it if I wanted to. No, I didn't like it. All right, I don't care. In any case. So we looked at terrain, and we changed our route of flight, either because we couldn't fly over that terrain because of the capability of the airplane, or what if we had a Cessna 182? A 182 is about 10% bigger than a 172. It's a little bit wider. It's a little bit longer. You can put more fat people in it than you can 172. You can put more cargo in it. But instead of having 100, it has 230. It also has a variable pitch propeller, which is like having an infinite set of gears, so it's actually more efficient. So at high altitude where the air's thin, the blades just go to a higher and higher pitch. So you can still develop a lot of power, even though it's not turbocharged. That 182, it'll go to 16,000 feet, no problem. So if I had a 182, I could say, well, I could have gone straight over the mountain next to that 14,000-foot mountain. I'm going east, so I'd climb to 15,500 or 17,500. But so I could handle the terrain. But what would I still need? Oxygen. Did you have a question, Brian? Okay, you can get an acceptable, I didn't say fantastic, an acceptable 172 for $20,000 to $35,000 used. You want one that the engine just got overhauled? $1,000. $20,000. Literally, if you took my airplane, which is a 1969, and you overhauled the engine, the interior, reupholstered the interior, and you put a new paint job on it, and you put $20,000 of radios, which is really easy to do. $20,000 airplane radios is nothing. The value of my airplane would go from 20 or 25. That same 5,000 hour airplane from 1969, it could go from 20 or 25,000 to $50,000 really easy. Because people looking at other airplanes and this airplane that got all fixed up, costing brand new paint. You just got because the engine overhaul is $15,000 to $20,000. So compared to an airplane, look at it and go, well, your airplane's going to engine's going to pay you that much for it, or the paint's been for years, it looks like crap. I'm going to have to paint it when I buy it, so I'm going to pay you $6,000 less. So, am I answering your? Oh, answer your question. So that 182, just add 20 grand. Just add 20 grand. So if you took a 182 that was in the same condition as my airplane, instead of being worth 20 or 25, it'd be 40 or 45. And it's more expensive to operate. It burns more fuel. It goes faster. Instead of 100 knots, 20 or 130 knots, and it will hold about 200 pounds more cargo and passengers. And it'll climb 3,000 or 8,000 feet higher. And but it's got 6 cylinders instead of 4, so it's a little bit more maintenance. It's got a variable pitch propeller, and it's got a governor to operate the propeller. So those things have to be overhauled. My airplane doesn't have a governor, and the blade is just one big piece of aluminum, so it has almost no maintenance on it. So, and I'm not trying to knock a 182, but it's not just going to cost you more to buy, it's going to cost you more to operate, which is one reason why I picked that 172, because you can put 2 people in it, and a weekend's worth of luggage. You can put 100 pounds. You can put a week's worth of luggage. You can put 100 pounds of luggage. That's 2 people with 50 pounds of luggage. And fill it up full of gas. Fly 3 hours and still have an hour and a half left. And just don't put anybody in the back seat. Okay, that means me and my wife and all the luggage and tequila that we can carry. And you have to be careful if you're flying between states. In the United States, if you go from one state to another, even in an airplane, there are state laws about importing alcoholic beverages. Like going into Texas, you can only bring 24 bottles of beer. I looked because I had taken my airplane out to Baton Rouge, Louisiana for 6 months. Started up a flight. I took my airplane out there. On the way back, my son, one of his favorite beers is only made in New Orleans. So we were going to load up the airplane with it just for fun. But I started looking at all the state laws of bringing it in. In Texas, it was 24 bottles. It was like, we're going to drink 24 bottles flying from Louisiana into Texas. I mean, my passengers would. Which brings up another good point. As soon as you lift up off of the ground, you're not in California. As soon as the wheels leave the runway, you are not in the state of California anymore. You are in federal airspace. So federal laws apply, not state laws. And there is no open container federal law. The FAA has a thing about the pilots and the required flight crew. You can't be drinking any alcohol. There's like 3 rules surrounding it, so we're going to write those things down since we're on a roll. Let's write down the rules for alcohol. And this is for required crew members, not the passengers. Just required. When I say required crew members, that's anybody that has to be there, like flight attendants. Okay, number 1, at least 8 hours from bottle to throttle. So you can't drink for at least 8 hours from when you start the engine. That's number 1. And you have to comply with all of these. Not just one of them, you have to comply with all of them. Number 2, your blood alcohol level cannot be any greater than 0.04. And that's about half of the legal limit in California. What's the legal limit in California? 0.08? I don't drink when I drive, so I don't really pay that much attention. So your blood alcohol level, your BAC, blood alcohol level, cannot be more than 0.04%. And you cannot be under the influence of alcohol. You have to comply with all 3 of these. You can't have had any alcohol to drink within the last 8 hours. You cannot have a blood alcohol level that's higher than 0.04. And you cannot be under the influence of alcohol. So let's say you stopped drinking 8.5 hours ago, and your blood alcohol is 0.039. But you're still woozy because you were drinking 8.5 hours ago. You're under the influence of alcohol. You cannot be a required crew member, including being the pilot. So you have to comply with all 3 of these. So generally speaking, and you don't have to write this down, if you're going to drink, and I'm not recommending that you drink alcohol, in particular in California for under 21. I'm highly discouraging that because I think it's against the law. If you're going to drink hours before if you're going to take off at 8 o'clock, you stop drinking before 8 o'clock the night before. And you need to have just a few drinks, not 17. Yeah, 16 is your typical limit. Yeah. So, but literally, if you get in an airplane and you get the wheels off of the ground, now the required flight, you can't have anything to drink. But your passenger sitting next to you in the front seat, bridges. As soon as you get off of the ground, you're in federal airspace. Not in cars. Yeah. In cars, in most states, open container, it's against the law. You can't have an open alcoholic beverage in the compartment where the driver can access it. So you got any of your open containers, you have to leave it in the trunk. Not that any would know about having open containers. So now we know about FAA rules and the use of alcohol. I'll tell you what, how about if we go till 10 of and not have a break? Will that work? We can either have a break now and come back in 10 minutes, or we can just keep going straight through at 10 minutes still. Is that okay? We just go straight through another 11 minutes? Because, all right, and nobody's saying no, don't do it. All right, so we looked at an example of terrain. Now let's look at an example of obstacles. Let's say we're going to fly from, we'll make it easy. We're going to fly from Fresno Air Terminal to Stockton. Now, is that Stockton? KSCK? KSCK. All right, so we're going to fly from Fresno all the way up to Stockton. So, for fun, I'll put my blue line on here. Yeah, this is real time. These are not clouds. Good question. This is precipitation. This is water droplets or ice, very, very small ice crystals. So this is, now granted, if it's raining or snowing, there's clouds, but these are radar returns, radar reflections, and radar does not bounce off of water vapor. It only bounces off of water droplets or water crystals. So green is the lightest, and then it gets yellow, and then it gets red. But generally speaking, where there's water and ice in the air, there's usually a lot of turbulence. So, and depending on what the temperature is, you may start getting ice sticking to your little tiny airplane. Question, Brian? It is fun to fly in a cloud. I've only been in a little tiny airplane and had ice stick to it once. And fortunately, we entered a cloud and it started happening and we went, ah! And we left, we got permission and flew to a lower altitude and got out of the cloud. But it took several minutes for that ice, even though we had descended to where it was warmer, it took several minutes for the ice to melt. And we barely got any ice on the airplane. So that's, for flying IFR, the number one thing that you have, that, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of skills to flying instruments that are completely different than flying VFR, but the number one thing that'll kill you in IFR conditions is flying into icing conditions, and so much ice sticks to the airplane that you can't maintain your altitude and you descend. Or, what's even worse, you get so much ice on the wings that it won't generate lift, and even though you're going 100 nautical miles an hour, you stall because the ice messes up the airflow over your wing so badly, because you'll die if you stall because you got too much ice. What's that? Oh, the blue one? You're asking a really good question. I don't know what the blue one is. I wonder if there's the, I don't know what the blue one is. That's a good question. Obstacles between Fresno and Stockton. So if we took off out of the Fresno Yosemite Airport, what are the obstacles near the airport? Let's see. There's a 642 foot tower. That's MSL. Well, I see. You mean these power lines? Yeah, those are probably only 100 feet tall. They're only on the chart not because you're likely to hit them, but because you can use them to navigate by looking out the window and figuring out where you are. So here's the one that's at 340 feet above ground level, 634 MSL. Here's the tower right here. Where's the other number? There's 521, but where's the other? It doesn't show how high it is AGL, but it's 521 MSL. And here's another tower at 322 feet off the ground. And here, let's see, I'm looking for towers. Here's one that's 201 feet. Here's one that's 241. Oh, wait, here's some nice ones. 260, 300 feet above the ground. Of course, there's Castle Tower, or Castle Airport. So it's looking like the obstacles, here's one that's 285 feet. I haven't seen any that have exceeded 400. Oh, wait, here's one, 420 feet. AGL, so there's one right there, 542 MSL. So I haven't seen anything that's been above 600 MSL. Look here at Ripon, 504-foot tower. Okay. It exceeds 600 feet MSL. So if I wanted at least 1,000 foot above all the obstacles, that means I'll climb up to 1,600 feet MSL. Okay. So then I would think about it and go, am I going to be happy if the engine quits? If I'm 1600 MSL, but the ground is up 200 or 300 feet, that's only a little more than 1,000 feet if I have a problem. That gives me 2 minutes. Now, if it's at 2 minutes and I trim the airplane to fly the best glide speed of 70 knots, 2 minutes at 70 knots is a little bit more than 2 minutes at 60 knots. If you're doing 60 knots, that's a mile a minute. So if I glide for 2 minutes, that's a little over 2 miles. So if the engine quit, that means I've got about, I can look out and say, well, I can probably do most things within 2 miles. But what if I climbed to another 1,000 feet, and I climbed 2,600 feet? That would double how much air, and it would double, I could go 4 miles out. So why not go to 2,000 feet above the ground? Say, well, I like to fly low because I pass faster. Well, it does. Fast. If you get up high, it looks like you're going slow. Anybody ever been on a jet airliner and look out the window? You look down at the ground? It doesn't look like you're going that fast. On a freeway doing on a freeway doing 70. And, oh wait, I know when it was. I was in Montana when they didn't have a speed limit. Yeah, that was when I was doing it. So what if, just for fun, let's look at one more obstacle, which is on your chart. Let's look at the San Francisco. Let's look at the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. I want to see if the Golden Gate Bridge is shown on here. There it is. Now, if you're flying over the Golden Gate Bridge, what's your AGL versus your MSL? You're flying right smack over the Golden Gate Bridge. Let's say your altimeter reads 1,000 feet. Is that AGL or MSL if you said it correctly? MSL. How high are you above the ground level? And don't say I'm over the water, I'm not over the ground. What's your AGL when you're over the ocean? The ocean is 200 feet above mean sea level? It is at sea level. So I'm going to ask the question again. If you've got your altimeter set correctly and you're at 1,000 feet indicated MSL, how high are you AGL? No. Forget. That says it's 760 feet tall. Forget that for a moment. You're over the San Francisco Bay, which is the ocean. Your altimeter is set correctly on the Colesman window, and you're flying at 1,000 feet MSL. What is your height AGL? You're 1,000 feet. So if you're over the ocean, your AGL and your MSL are the same. Okay, I love that trick question. All right, so that would explain why they don't have two numbers next to the Golden Gate Bridge, because it's 760 feet MSL, but it's also 760 feet AGL. So there's an obstacle. So I think the FAA would say that since there's a lot of cars on that bridge, they would probably say that that was a congested area. So you would have to fly how high? Say that again? Nope, it's not 2,000 feet above. Feet above if you're how close? If you're within 2,000 feet horizontally. That's a little less than half a statute mile. That's 1/3 of a nautical mile. I'm sorry? Helicopters have different set of rules. Effectively, helicopter rules are if the engine quits, you won't hurt anybody or property if the engine quits. I would highly recommend you not fly under the Golden Gate Bridge in a helicopter unless you're a search and rescue helicopter and you're saving somebody that's under the bridge. Because if somebody sees your N number and the FAA asks you questions, they're going to go, I think that was careless and reckless operation. Why did you fly under the bridge? And you can say, because it was cool, man. If you were going to do a photo, I would call the FAA and get a waiver and say, I want to get permission to do this movie. That's what I would do. And you can get permission from the FAA to do silly things. And they go, well, okay, if you kill yourself, then at least no one else will die. That'll be fine. Jonathan. No, prisons are not prohibited. They're not restricted. I've never seen airspace on top of prisons. Maybe there is one somewhere, but not that I've seen. Sure, you can fly over prisons. What you need to do is hover over the prison yard in a helicopter at about 200 feet and throw a rope out. Oh, what's the name of that movie? There's an interesting movie. I'm trying to remember. I think it was Charles Bronson. Does anybody know the actor Charles Bronson? He got busted out of a prison in Mexico, and they did it by helicopter. They flew in with a rope. I'm not making it. It's a movie. It's just a movie. And that's how they escaped him from prison, is they overflew the prison and lowered a rope or a ladder or something. You know, I saw that movie a long time ago, and it was the movies. It's just like the Imperial troopers in Star Wars have really bad aim. They can't hit the side of a barn. They just go, and then they still don't hit. Okay, so let's look at airspace. So if we wanted, let's go back to that same trip we were going to make from Fresno to Stockton. And if we took off, and let's say we leveled off at 2,600 feet, or correction, let's say we leveled off at 1,600 feet, are we going to fly through Castle Airport's Class D airspace at 1,600 feet MSL? 1,600 feet MSL. Yeah, this is Class Delta. Castle, they call it MER because they call it Merced Airport. I don't know why. Maybe it's Castle Airport. I don't know. But in any case, you notice it says minus 20. So that means Class D airspace goes up to, but not including, 2,000 feet. So if we fly across it at 1,600, are we going to have to call them up? Are we going to fly through Class D? Yeah, we'd have to call them up. Is there anything wrong with calling them up and say, yo, what's up, I'm down here, can I go through there? I mean, it's a little more complicated than that, and you probably don't want to use that accent. But no, it's not any big deal. But if I didn't want to do that, all I'd have to do is climb up to at least 2,000 feet. They probably will just laugh at you after they let go of the key because of your accent. That's my guess. There it is. It's time to go.